on a high mountain, shrouded in white clouds and overgrown with wild grass, where birds seldom fly and people rarely set foot, there lived a man in quiet solitude. No one knew where he came from, how long he had lived there, or even what his name was. The villagers at the foot of the mountain, generation after generation, knew him only by a simple yet mysterious name, the drumkeeper. He never came down the mountain, never visited anyone, and never spoke a word. But every early morning, before the sun could pierce through the thick mist, the sound of a drum would echo through the valleys, deep, warm, and steady, rippling across the forests and hills. The beat was never rushed or urgent. It was calm and steady, like the breathing of the earth and sky. At first, only a few noticed, but as the years passed, the whole region grew used to the drumbeat, as if it were a vital rhythm of the day. They say that on days when exhaustion weighed heavy and life felt unbearable, just hearing that drum made things feel a little lighter. The sorrow didn't vanish, but it no longer crushed them. Some had lost their fathers, some had lost entire harvests, but after a night hearing the mountain's drum, they would rise early and work again, as if something unseen was gently comforting them. Over time, the drumkeeper became a living legend. Children listened wide-eyed to stories about him, as if hearing tales of a mountain god. Adults spoke of him with quiet reverence. Some believed he was a sage in hiding. Others said he was the very spirit of the mountain, reborn in human form to beat the drum, a reminder to never forget the joy of simply being alive. No one ever saw his face clearly. Whenever someone climbed the mountain, it would vanish deeper into the fog. Only the drumbeat remained, and maybe that was enough. In a world that grows louder, busier, and more burdened each day, the drumkeeper on the wild mountaintop has become a symbol of something simple yet sacred, a wordless joy and a quiet that knows how to smile through life's storms. No one knew why he chose the drum, not the gentle sound of a flute, nor the lingering chime of a bell, but the drum, raw, resonant, an instrument most would reserve for battlefields or festivals. And yet, in the hands of the drumkeeper, each beat carried a strange, soulful rhythm, as if telling stories through sound, as if laughing in the heartbeat of the universe. The rhythm was never the same. Some days it burst with the joy of spring festivals. Other days it echoed with a sorrow, like a lullaby floating across the mountainside. The elders said that if you listened long enough, you'd feel the drum change, with the moods of the sky, with the feelings of those who heard it, and even with the unspoken burdens of the village below. It didn't cry out for attention. It simply rang out and sank deep into the hearts of those who heard it, gently but profoundly. Over time, the villagers stopped treating it as something strange. It became part of the rhythm of life. A young mother sweeping her yard would smile at its sound. A farmer, hoe in hand beneath the noon sun, would feel his sweat grow lighter. Children playing in the sunlight would clap along to its beat, as if the drum itself was teaching them how to feel joy without needing a reason. Some of the elders, wiser from time and sorrow, would quietly say, "That drum is medicine, not for the body, but for the soul." Those who had lost hope, who had grown weary, who saw life as a torn coat beyond repair. All they needed was to sit still, listen to a few morning beats, and suddenly it felt like sunlight was breaking through inside. What made it even more remarkable was that the drumkeeper never spoke, never preached, never offered advice. But with one simple act, beating his drum each day, he quietly transformed lives. No one felt forced to be happy. Yet somehow, when the drum echoed, they felt a little lighter. Perhaps in a world where everyone rushes to speak, silence and action are the greatest teachers. That drum never told anyone how to live. It simply awakened something gentle, yet powerful. The reminder that joy doesn't come from the outside, but from how we learn to listen within. As the sound of the drum slowly became an inseparable part of daily life, there were those who didn't just listen. They began to wonder. It was no longer enough to stand at the foot of the mountain. guessing at the meaning behind each beat. They wanted to see the drum keeper with their own eyes, to ask him why he played, who he truly was, and what could move a man to spend his entire life beating out such strange, wordless rhythms on a lonely mountaintop. And so, the first pilgrims began to climb. Some were scholars, hoping to find a hidden philosopher. Some were healers, curious about what made the drum so soothing to the human heart. One was a young woman, still trembling from loss, clutching a white mourning scarf, hoping to find something, anything, that could mend the hollow in her chest. Each carried their own question, their own hope, their own quiet ache. But those who reached the summit found only an old man in a plain cloth robe, sitting quietly beside a worn-out drum. He said nothing. He simply smiled, a kind, gentle smile, but deep as an endless ravine. And then, as if no one had ever come, he returned to his drumming, slow, steady, as warm and full as the mountain's own breath. Some were stunned, even disappointed. They had expected wise words, revelations about life's great mysteries. But all they received was the sound of the drum and a silent smile. And yet, the longer they sat beside him, the lighter they felt, as if the tangled questions within them were unraveling, dissolving into each rhythm, not needing to be answered anymore. When they descended the mountain, no one came back with clear answers, but all of them carried a strange stillness. And sometimes, that is the most precious thing of all. The villagers began to whisper to one another. He doesn't speak because he knows words could distract the heart, but the drum, it goes straight in. And so, the mountain became a place of quiet pilgrimage for those trying to find their way back to themselves. Not to hear teachings, but to learn the art of silence and of listening. One windy autumn morning, people suddenly noticed the drum was silent. That day, the village woke to an unfamiliar emptiness. There was no drum to greet the dawn, no deep, echoing sound rolling down the cliffs, calling the sun to rise from the heart of the forest. Only the wind, whispering cold and hollow through the hills. People fell quiet. Those who had lived their whole lives to the rhythm of the drum. Those who had once climbed the mountain just to hear its beat among the clouds, now stood still, heavy-hearted, glancing at one another without words. The news spread quickly. The drumkeeper had passed away. No one knew the hour he left. Perhaps it was the moment the first yellow leaf fell, or when last night's cold wind swept across the mountainside. They say he was found just as he had always been, sitting quietly beside the drum, his hand resting gently on its surface, as if he'd simply drifted off, in the middle of one final rhythm. People, those who once feared the mountain for its wildness and chill, now climbed without hesitation. No one told them to. They came carrying flowers, white mourning cloths, and even small drums they had made themselves. Gathering around the spot where he once sat, they didn't cry. They simply stood in silence. And then, a child stepped forward, and with a small hand, gently tapped the drum's skin. A soft thumb echoed through the forest, and in that moment, everyone could feel he was still there. The silence after the wind was not an emptiness, but a strange kind of fullness, as if he hadn't vanished, but had melted into the earth, into the breeze, into the memory of all who had ever listened. The drum no longer sounded, but something still resonated deep inside them. A heartbeat, a quiet reminder that joy does not need noise, that life is not found in sound, but in presence. From that day forward, his drum remained untouched atop the mountain. No one dared play it the way he once had, but whenever someone needed to find peace again, they would climb, sit beside it, and close their eyes, and in that sacred silence, they would hear it, the drumbeat rising from within themselves. Years passed since the drumkeeper left. His old drum still rests quietly atop the mountain, its surface weathered by wind and mist. No one replaced him. No one dared to strike the drum again, and no one ever claimed to be his successor. Yet strangely, the drum never truly fell silent, for its beat now came not from its skin, but from within the hearts of those who once listened. Children grew up hearing stories about him, as if he were a myth, a spirit of the mountain itself. Never truly a man, but the grown-ups, those who had sat beside him, those who had once listened with aching hearts. They knew better. To them, he was not legend. He was memory, a quiet rhythm that had once shifted the course of their lives. One man, after returning from the mountain, gave up business altogether and opened an art class for children. Another, who had once planned to end his life, came down and became a composer for cancer patients. And the young woman who once climbed in mourning now tells stories for a living, telling, again and again, of an old man who said nothing, but whose drum made hearts feel wider. It seemed his legacy was not the sound, but the listening, not the drum, but the way he played it, the way he struck a gentle rhythm each day, not for applause, not for praise, but simply because if today he could bring joy, then today was not wasted. And so, even though he was gone, the mountain never truly fell silent. Those who came did not bring prayers. They brought questions tucked in their chests. They sat quietly, no sentiments, no answers, only the wind in the trees, the rustle of leaves, and in the stillest moment, they heard it, a drumbeat rising not from the world outside, but from the chambers of their own hearts. People began to say, each of us carries an invisible drum inside. Strike it every day, with kindness, with a smile, with the courage to listen without judging. Drum not for response, but because it is how we live. And in that way, what they passed down was not just a story, but a way of being, a rhythm that never ends, a laughter without sound, a presence, gentle and eternal. The drum keeper had become part of the mountain, just as the mountain had become part of the people's hearts. Though he was gone, though the drum no longer echoed daily, something strange still resonated, not in sound, but in feeling, not through beats, but through a quiet transformation inside all who had once listened. The girl who once wept beside the drum now brought her own child up the mountain. When the child asked, "Mom, where did the drum go?" she didn't answer right away. Instead, she held the child's hand, placed it gently on his chest, and said, "Listen here. If your heart is still warm, if your soul stays open, then the drum is still there." Generation after generation, those who told his story could no longer remember his face clearly, but they all remembered that quiet smile, that gaze, as if it had seen everything, but chose not to speak. They remembered the evenings on the mountain, when the sun dipped low, and only the drum remained, and his shadow stretched long across the earth. Some said he was a sage. Others believed he was a hidden monk. A few even thought he was the reincarnation of a Buddha. But to most, he was simply a man who chose to live differently. And perhaps that was what made him extraordinary. The drum keeper didn't preach. He didn't save anyone. He offered no promises. He didn't point to the path. He helped people hear it for themselves. Through silence, through listening, through the echoes that stirred whenever they were close to forgetting who they were. Above all, he taught people this. Life is unpredictable, but if you can keep a rhythm in your heart, steady, kind, and without show, you will never lose your way. That rhythm is compassion. It's the calm at the center of chaos. It's the gentle call that brings you home, not to a place, but to yourself. And so, no matter how many years pass, no matter if no one remembers his name, his face, or even the exact sound of that ancient drum, each time you fall quiet, each time you open your heart, you'll hear it again, the drumbeat from within.